Hi there, I'm Amy with Honest in Full, and on my blog, honestinfull.com, I talk a lot about, or I have a lot of vegetarian recipes, and that's because I'm a vegetarian. I have been for over 13 years, but I love sharing with people who want to listen, or maybe don't even want to listen, why I'm a vegetarian. And so I'm going to start this series on vegetarianism. So it's a 3-part series. I'll put out the first week of every month, so this is April. So this week, I'm going to share why I became a vegetarian, what it looked like then, what it looks like now, and kind of my journey. Next month, I'm going to share more things I've learned since being a vegetarian, both big picture and small picture things. And then the final week, I'm going to share more about tips and tricks and resources for people who are interested in becoming a vegetarian. So with that and a sip of coffee, let's dive into my story. So when people ask me why I'm a vegetarian, I think a lot of people, or they assume that people become vegetarians because they love animals. For me, I like animals, but that was not my inspiration. That was not why I became a vegetarian. For me, it was for health reasons. And so to share this part of my story, I have to go back to my teenage years. Growing up, I always had really bad menstrual cramps. I remember sometimes I would have to go home sick from school because I was just in so much pain. I couldn't concentrate. I would be on the toilet for an embarrassingly long amount of time and in a lot of pain. I would lay down with a heating pad, trying to just relieve from the pain and the cramps. I remember one time in college, my roommates had me call the nurse's hotline because they were worried I was having like appendicitis or something. And I was like, guys, it's just my cramps. But I called and talked to a nurse. Anyway, nothing came of that. But they were bad enough that people would be concerned. Now, in my mid-20s, I moved to Cameroon, Africa. I was a teacher at a missionary boarding school, and I was there for a year. It took me a little while to notice because life was overwhelming there the first few months and even the whole year. But I eventually realized that my cramps were not very bad when I had my period. And I was just grateful. I didn't really analyze it. I was just grateful for it because I had enough other things that were difficult and stressful that it was nice not to have bad cramps. But when I got back to the States, so a year later, I was in a transition season. I remember I was living with my folks and getting ready to move to Chicago for grad school a few months later. And the first time I got my period, I was so sick. I had such bad cramps. I was throwing up for 10 hours straight and laying on the couch and just miserable. And that started me on a journey. I was like, what is different? What is different between now and Cameroon? It's not just the air I'm breathing. It has to be something that I'm putting in my body that is affecting me. So in Cameroon, all the food was made from scratch. It was expensive to buy processed food. I didn't eat a lot of dairy because it was like powdered milk, which was gross. I did eat meat that we would get in the market, mostly chicken because that was more affordable, but we made everything from scratch. So it didn't have the added preservatives and things. And that was something I wanted to implement coming back, to the States anyway. So that's what I decided to do. Started making more food from scratch, which was fun and helpful and probably healthier for me, but it didn't change anything with my cramps. So I have small conversations with people here and there about it. And one friend who's more kind of natural living minded, I remember she was talking about how she has learned or is curious about how all of the hormones and antibiotics the mass meat industry puts into our meat, how that affects us when we consume the meat. And so that set me on this journey, of trying to puzzle it out and figure it. And I was like, well, I could try. Maybe that does mess with my hormones and mess with my cramps and whatnot. So I'll try being a vegetarian. I'm going to cut out meat and be a vegetarian for 3 months is what I said. So January 2009, I moved to Chicago. I lived on my own for the first semester, and so I had free reign to cook whatever I wanted, so it was easy to say, no more meat, I'm being a vegetarian. And so I dove in. I had to look up recipes and get creative. It's hard to get out of that meat, potato, vegetable mindset, but I did it. You can do it. And so I have fun doing it, but I remember the first time my period came around, it was like my test, and I remember still laying on the couch watching Grey's Anatomy with a heating pad because my cramps were bad. And I was like, oh, it's not working yet. I'd given it 3 months. That was the first month. So as the months progressed, still pretty similar. My cramps they maybe got a little bit better. But what I do remember is that I was sleeping better. I fell asleep faster, I slept longer, I woke up more naturally. I had more energy throughout the day, and I had lost about 10 pounds and was kind of keeping that off. So I decided to stick with it. I thought it was fun enough. My experiment was still continuing after 3 months. And so now it's 13 years later and I stuck with it. What has changed now from then is then I initially, because I was trying to avoid hormones and antibiotics, I did initially eat some meat that was not treated with those things. So grass-fed beef, which is expensive, so I did not do that a lot on my own. And then venison. My dad's a hunter, and I had some venison in the freezer, so I remember putting it in a stew once. And then I remember the summer, so this is maybe 6 months after being vegetarian, 6 or 7 months, people were barbecuing outside and grilling, and it smelled good. And I wanted a burger. And so I went and got some venison and thawed it and made a burger. And I was so sick. Not like throwing up sick, but just like, sluggish, and my stomach just felt gross, and I felt just that little nauseous edge for a while. And I just don't think my stomach could digest it very well anymore. So that was kind of the end of that. I decided no more meat in that way at all, and just gave it all up. I still do dairy. I don't do a lot of dairy just because I have a sluggish digestive system and dairy does affect me. So I do cheese and ice cream because I like ice cream. But I don't really do a whole lot of other dairy. And we do eat fish. Try to make sure it's wild caught or sustainably sourced, which is not a guarantee, and there's still issues with that, which I will talk more about next week or next month. We do eggs. Again, I try to get eggs that are cage-free, free-roaming, antibiotic-free, all of those things. But that's still kind of uncensored and unknown too. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in the food industry. So that's largely what my vegetarian diet looks like. When my husband and I were dating, he was leaning towards being a vegetarian and kind of didn't eat a ton of meat, but he's also a distance runner and felt like he really needed to make sure he had that protein. But now he's full vegetarian and gets enough protein. I'll talk more about that on my third video, tips and tricks for being a vegetarian. But we both feel great and enjoy our vegetarian diet. I think it's a really fun way to cook. You have to be careful to kind of balance things out and just be mindful, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. I had a great vegetarian pregnancy. I felt really good the whole time. Some nausea in the first trimester, but I know that's normal, but I felt like overall I had good energy and just felt really good. I did natural labor and I felt great for that. It was really long, but I had the energy to push through it. My son is a vegetarian. He's 13 months and has been eating solids for about 7 months. And he's vegetarian and is thriving. Doctors have no concern for him at all. So I think it's a very valid way to live, and it's something that I really enjoy doing. I enjoy teaching others about it. And it honestly feels a little bit like vegetarian is my superpower. It's like my way to save the world and save the planet one meal and one snack at a time. I will talk more about that next month in how being vegetarian affects the environment, and it's something that we can all make big choices or just small choices that will fall in line with that. So I hope it's been helpful to hear some of my journey and my story. I know there's a lot of women out there that have issues with their cycles, either irregularity or heavy bleeding or heavy cramps or whatnot. And I think diet has a lot to do with it. I think our gut is the second brain of our body. It helps regulate hormones. I think what we put in our bodies really counts. So my challenge I would leave with you today is, if you do eat meat, think about where that meat comes from. Be intentional to learn a little more. How is that meat treated? Not necessarily like humanely, which is important to pay attention to, but more of like, are those pigs given antibiotics and hormones? And what do they eat? Because whatever they eat ultimately is what you're getting into your system as well. So I think that's important, that matters. So that's my challenge for you today, is to think about where your meat comes from and what they eat and what goes into that meat, because it all goes into you. So I hope it's helpful. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.